We continue with Companion Unfair Build Guides. The next in line is Regill. So let's go straight over there and check Regill out, how you should level him up from 1 to 20. Here you can see my stats for Regill and how it looked like on my Unfair run. As you can see, armor class is high, saves are very high, and attack is absolutely absurd. Damage and critical, they go along with attack. Truth to be told, Regill is the boss killer and highest damage single target damage dealer in a game. Extremely vulnerable, but he can hurt a lot with correct buffs. What skills do we need for Regill? The most important is lore, religion, and knowledge arcana. Everything else doesn't matter. So make sure you have these two when you play with Regill in your team. Now we're gonna check itemization for Regill. What I always try to use on Regill was any helmet that will give armor class or saves. Amulet is classic, armor class plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. I could never find a valid goggles for Regill because others needed those that he could use, but basically everything that's gonna raise damage against outsiders, demons, that's gonna raise attack or flat damage, those would be the goggles that you wanna use on Regill if you plan to play non-stop with him in your party. This is the unfair guide, so remember, if it works on unfair, it will work on all other difficulties as well. For cloaks, again, all resists, up, saves, plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and onwards. You can use medium armor or heavy armor for Regill as long as it is adamantine or mithril and as long as it gives proper passive abilities. Same can be said about robe, or better to say under armor. Everything that provides defense, saves, you should equip that. As far as ring go, the first ring should always have plus armor class 1 to 7. And the other one I like giving to Regill is Ring of Summoning. First, because of the AoE buff towards your entire teammates. And the second one, you can summon stuff and distract enemies. Any bracers that will raise Regill's damage are good to go. Like this over here. Same can be said about gloves. Any gloves that provide damage or attack are good to go for Regill. For belt, I believe this is quite basic, okay? Everything that's gonna raise strength, dexterity, and constitution is a must. Early on, you should focus dexterity and constitution. Boots, the best one that you can get for Regill are with constant freedom of movement. There are other boots later on, but that's way much later, so make sure that you put some immunity boots, terrain, or freedom of movement on Regill. Weapon, only gnome hooked hammers as they come, and they will come from plus 3 and onwards, plus 2 and onwards. I think it doesn't matter, just take better and what's more expensive. Eventually you will end up at Wrecking Devil. That's the one you wanna use, because it's the best gnome hooked hammer in the game. Regill's Mythic Path, Mythic leveling. The first one is a brain dead, no brain, less stand. On a second level we take 2 weapon fighting Mythic. On the third one we take Unrelenting Assault. On the fourth one we're gonna get improved critical Mythic with a gnome hooked hammer, of course. On fifth one we take Thundering Blows, so we always hit even when we miss. On a sixth one we take Weapon Specialization Mythic on a gnome hooked hammer. Rupture Restraints, so he becomes immune to all of those disgusting things in a game. For the seventh one, for the eighth one, we go Weapon Focus Mythic on a gnome hooked hammer. As you can see, everywhere is gnome hooked hammer. Basically, we raise damage and attack, non-stop when we can. Leading Strike, so everyone hurts the target that Regill is striking. On level 9, and on level 10 Mythic we take Flawless Attacks. That's about it with Regill, very simple. Now we go to classic leveling. A lot of people ask me, how do you make your Regill valid? Because everyone complains that he's way too weak. Yes, he is, for unfair he is, but he is so freaking mega strong. if you play as Aeon. That's how my Regill was valid. Why? Because all of this feed that you see here goes toward his own benefits, and I give him team feats in return, so he is twice stronger. And I also gave him, as Aeon Inquisitor, on top of his last stand invulnerability, I could give him like 60 more seconds of invulnerability into 50 more seconds of invulnerability, so I could make my Regill, that has the highest freaking attack and damage in a game with all buffs applied and so on, imagine how it looks then, invulnerable for like 2 minutes in a row, and he was valid on unfair. He was actually stomping everything, okay, plus his own last stand. That's how you can make him valid. You can also make him valid on unfair with other mythic pots too, with your main class, but this is one of the best ways. Alright. How you can also make Regill valid on unfair without being an Aeon. You put Scylla first, and you make enemies attack Scylla. And then you put Regill into a fight, so he survives longer and deals more damage, as he survives more. So, what I did with Regill and how did I level him up? I was sticking with his lore, alright, with Hellknight, and I maxed it out. And I also stuck with his lore with Armiger, and I added 1 point into Monk because of a free feat, alright, and because of great stats with a Monk. As you can see what you receive here, all saving throws plus attack for that one level only. So, Regill, you receive him as a Hellknight and Armiger and so on, so let's see what he gets out of it. I believe he's a level 1 in Hellknight and everything else went into Armiger. So what they gave him? They gave him on the first level a Gnome Hooked Hammer, that's classic. Weapon Specialization, Gnome Hooked Hammer. Improved 2 weapon fighting, those would be the feats you want on Regill, and a greater 2 weapon fighting. Okay, everything else are passives that he gets along the way as you level up. Again, this point into Monk, you want to put it on level 18, 19, 20, doesn't matter, so you get all of those free stats, alright? Because it's worth way much more than putting that single point into Armiger. Alright. Now we want Hellknight. That's what I was using with Regill. So, I read what we took over here. We took Weapon Focus, Weapon Specialization, all Gnome Hooked Hammer, improved 2 weapon fighting, and greater 2 weapon fighting. From up here, all he gets are passives, 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 and some of them you can also pick what he's gonna learn. We're gonna check it out once we are done with classic feats. So he goes with 2 weapon fighting, he goes with a weapon finesse, he goes with a fighter's finesse. Those would be all the things you want to learn along the way in that order. Toughness, improved critical with a Gnome Hooked Hammer, hammer the gap, critical focus, blind fight, double slice, and a greater weapon focus with a Gnome Hooked Hammer. Now, if you don't play as Aeon and if you cannot share team feats, we know that we're gonna need Seize the Moment, Outflank, Precise Strikes, and Shake It Off on Regill. 4 levels. What can we exclude from here and give it to Regill? What we can exclude here is greater 2 weapon fighting and take Shake It Off, improved 2 weapon fighting and take Precise Strikes. Instead of a toughness, we can take Outflank, and now we need Seize the Moment. You need to sacrifice something for him to be valid, and that something can be blind fight. Hellknight comes with domains. You'll see them once they proc, as you level up, of course. And the domains you want are War Domain into a free feat. You're gonna take Staggering Critical as a free feat. You want Knowledge Domain so you can have Teaching Moment available, and you want Protection Domain so you can have Aura of Protection. That's all there is to it with Hellknight, without complicating things. So let's check it out fast, once more. Force of Will Compulsion is what you want into War Domain. There, you're gonna get a bonus combat feat. Force of Will Fear is the one you're gonna learn next into Knowledge Domain. Force of Will Charm, immunity against Charm, into Protection Domain. That's how you level up Regill as a Hellknight. So, once you receive Regill as companion, you max out Hellknight, then you ramp up Armiger to 9, okay? And then you put 1 point into a monk and you take dodge. That's everything there is for Regill. I told you what to switch for what. You will need to sacrifice Greater 2 Weapon Fighting, Improved 2 Weapon Fighting, Blind Fight, and Toughness, and add Shake It Off, Precise Strikes, Outflank, and Seize the Moment instead of those 4. You level them up in this order. This would be the quick stats for Regill to check it out better if you want to. Now we're gonna hover over abilities, pause where you want. This comes with my Aeon, all of these immunities. All the feats. And racial traits. Regill doesn't have a spellbook. And now the main question is, how do we play Regill? Before the fight, before you enter the fight, like 10 seconds before you enter the fight, you're gonna click on Order of the Godclaw, you're gonna click on Void Form, you're gonna click on Aura of Protection, and you're gonna make some of these as passives for your weapon, depends on the enemies you're fighting against. Once you enter the fight, the enemy you're fighting with, you're gonna smite him, but make sure that, for example, Scylla or your main character, if it's a melee, trigger the fight first, so Regill enters second, and burst enemies out. So smite them and enjoy. What else can you do with Regill? Because I told you what ring to use, you can cast Summon Monsters to distract enemies because of the Ring of Summoning. One of the most stupid things you can do with Regill is to charge first into battle with a charge ability. That's the way to get Regill killed. This is your bread and butter spell. You only have one usage of Teaching Moment. When it's really tough, make sure to use this a second before entering the fight. That will be all for Regill. He is valid on unfair, you just need to know what you're doing. On other difficulties, he's a bloody beast. Hard and below. Now, he is probably the most boring class to play in the game because you don't do much, you just cast 3 or 4 spells before fight, you pre-buff, better to say, and then you just right click on enemies and he does his job. He is though very funny and very good as far as lore goes, as far as all of his commands go in combat, in conversations, and so on. He is good to have in a party. He lifts the spirits. But, as I said, very, very boring. He is user-friendly, though, and everyone that plays on easier difficulties will absolutely love Regill, because you don't need to think a lot, you just right-click and he smacks everything to the ground. In other words, Regill might be the best companion for easier difficulties and one of the worst companions for unfair difficulty if you don't play as Aeon. If you play as Aeon, Regill is the strongest melee companion in the game.